have some kind of idea why Paul van der Klee might want to block me. I think the official reasons was, some kind of uncomplimentary remark I made about this boomer Paul van der Klee knew, who was always rapping. I know it's possible to learn how to rap even though you're white. I guess I just didn't think it was impressive that a white man can do that, in his mature years. And I guess for some reason I find it particularly distasteful. But I imagine he must have some kind of mental health issue. I know a lot of people that Paul van der Klee, the Calvinist pastor in Sacramento, has dealings with people online and off, with people with mental health issues. And I suppose we sometimes have to identify individuals as members of a group and make judgments about them as members of a group. Some people may think it's sexist or racist or whatever, but surely nobody is claiming, not even I am claiming, that we are always rational, coherent, and consistent in our worldview. But I have noticed to my horror and disgust that a lot of people just collect a smorgasbord of their likes and dislikes, and they don't care when I point out to them that you can't. What am I trying to say? Supposing you like black women, but you're not black, but you hate black men. That would be inconsistent and incoherent, because black babies are produced by black parents, and black parents have to be male and female. And to say that you only like black women is but hate black men is incoherent. Obviously you can only talk to black women and try to have sex with them, and completely ignore black men because you hate them. But fundamentally that view is incoherent. So this is an example. You can hate on unmarried mothers, but want a bigger and better and more generous welfare state. That is also a view that is fundamentally incoherent, because by enabling the creation of a bigger and better and more generous welfare state, you will be creating more unmarried mothers. This is the sort of thing I'm talking about. Oh dear, I'm wandering off the subject of Paul van der Klee. Let us go back to what I was trying to discuss, which is speculating on the reasons why he's blocked me. I may have been misbehaving in his live chat because, well, I am not shy of expressing my views on what I think of the Trinity, and I guess they barely tolerated me, and I actually don't remember what I said now in the live chat. And then I was banned, and then I created another account, and I guess it was immediately spotted, even though I took great care not to discuss secular Quranism. I guess I don't know if it's a good thing or not, that even if I do not discuss secular Quranism, people who have known me for a while and know my modus operandi will somehow notice that I am the promoter of secular Quranism. So anyway, he blocked me on my second account, which was a little disappointing, but I suppose I did go crazy because, you know, on a subject that interests me, I have lots and lots to say, and I do break down my objection to what you said in a sentence by analysing the actual words of the sentence, and it can become, I suppose, too much. Yes, too many comments. And people in the past, other than Paul Van der Klee, have complained. But then, what is the point? What is the point of having all these comments and not refraining from expressing them? And if you put them in a big fat block of text, nobody will want to read it. They'll get bored. So you have to break up all your different points into different comments. Well, that's what I do, and the consequences that there appears to be too many, and I guess you can use that as a reason to disable me from commenting on your videos. But why do I keep going back to Paul Van der Klee? It is because he represents American Christianity. He's also a Democrat supporter, and he hates Trump and calls Trump the destroyer. And I suppose I keep going back because his community is really a microcosm of American confusion. And as a political commentator and as a political activist who is actively promoting secular Quranism to Americans, because it is only, it would be the quickest way of launching it, to the rest of the world. If I can get Americans to adopt it, there's no point talking to the British or the Europeans, basically vassal states of America. So the confusion and chaos of Western thinking does come from America. And how can I ignore Paul Van der Klee when, in his own way, he's trying to sort things out, but without changing his religion, you see? And that, I think, that there ought to be a name for someone who knows, A, that something must be done, B, that no one is going to do it because it's a very unpopular thing to do, and C, he doesn't want to be the unpopular person who, points to the elephant in the room or something. And I think Paul Van der Klee fits a description. I've also met him in London a few years ago when in a Wetherspoons pub when he was, introducing his estuary protocols. I offered to buy him a drink, but he declined. But we did have a friendly conversation, something to do with the Russians, I think. So he is a thoughtful, educated, and intelligent man, and a very good YouTuber. He's trying all kinds of things to, create interest in his channel. And actually, I'm quite happy to give it to him. And I will be kind of, what do you call it in YouTube? I will be tagging my video to his. So you can all go there and, admire him for the wonderful YouTuber that he is. He's a very good speaker, tall, charismatic, and really quite thoughtful, although quite a few of his streams don't really amount to much. But maybe I fall into the same trap myself of not talking about anything much and waffling on. But I try really to not say things for the sake of saying things and only stream when I do feel I have something new to say. So I understand that religion is a very controversial topic. It always was, even when or even before all this, even when the West was a more stable, confident place. Because when you question somebody's beliefs, even if it's nothing to do with the religion, is even if it's about some, family affair, some family event, you support this uncle against that uncle, or you saw things differently about this long-standing family feud, etc. So I basically think everything is political, and you might as well just go to the fundamentals, even on first acquaintance. And this is why Speaker's Corner is so important. That you can just turn up and talk to strangers, no need for small talk, asking about the wife and the children, straight down to you are wrong and I am right. You are evil and I am good. And be prepared to have a longish discussion about it without coming to blows. And this is, of course, the most important thing. It's not, just some kind of ritualistic. I'll discuss this controversial topic. I will allow you to comment on it, and then I will comment on it, on your comment, and then I'll just completely ignore you. And this, I think, is actually more enraging than not allowing somebody to comment at all, because then, it would allow this appearance of a dialogue only superficial and insincere. And going back to the reasons why Paul van der Clay blocked me, it is because I do want to get to the bottom of the matter, the heart of the subject, and for this reason, it is important to break down sentences and highlight the controversial words that people don't ever seem to want to discuss. So let me play for you this bit that attracted my attention, and I will also point out to you that he goes on, they go on to discuss methods of communication and what people are looking for when they have a dialogue. Betel, I've read your comment. I'm sorry, but it's not just the Abrahamic religions. I'm sure there were tribal wars when we were all living together in our tribal communities, and each tribe would have their own tribal god, and the presumption it would be that the tribe who lost the tribal war was defeated by the god of the victorious tribe who conquered the defeated tribe. It is still the same thing even now. So while you single out the Abrahamic religions for having been the ones who wreaked havoc, it's only because the Abrahamic religions are better at acquiring empire than Hinduism and Buddhism. And we know that the Buddhists have hardly acquired any empire. I think just one, and it's been over and out a long time ago. There were the Srivijaya and the Majapahit Hindu Buddhist empires, and they were superseded by Islam. So let's just admit it, all right? I'm not saying anything controversial. It's a historical fact that the Abrahamic religions, because they have a more powerful God, a bossier God, if you prefer, a more jealous God, they have done rather better, because organized religion, and by organized religion, I mean requiring people of the group, if you want to be, a member of the gang of Jews or gang of Christians or gang of Muslims, you are expected to affirm the beliefs, values, and rules of that religion. That is what is meant by organized religion. Hinduism is not organized because Hinduism is not really a religion. Hinduism is the name that the British gave to the peoples. Sorry. Hinduism is the name that the British colonialists gave to the religions of the peoples of the Indus Valley. Well, even now, after the British have left, they can't even properly classify, the religions of the peoples of the Indus Valley. There's, let me think, there's Hare Krishna, there's Arya Samaj. I mean, they're not the same religion. So if you get those two, groups to talk to each other, they'll probably argue with each other about idols and stuff. So it isn't a correct. Hinduism is not a proper religion. That is really what I'm trying to say. So to the extent that anything came out of Hinduism that could be a system of moral or ethical behavior, that was Buddhism. So it was a Buddha who came up with the Eightfold Path, the Four Noble Truths. But even then, it's only a personal philosophy. It's called a religion because it believes in the afterlife, which is reincarnation, which is something the Hindus do. And but the problem with Buddhism is that it's a big black hole when you ask a Buddhist, well, who administers reincarnation if there is no God? And if you believe, as I do, that Buddhism comes from Hinduism and that Buddhism is just codified Hinduism, then as regards the afterlife, you would have to go back to Hinduism and, so according to Hindus, who administers reincarnation? According to Hindus, and you would be told that someone called Lord Yama, I think, administers reincarnation. So we know it's a made-up story. Let me make sure I get the name right for you. Who administers reincarnation in Hinduism? I'm sure it's Lord Yama. AI is saying, maybe I'm not getting the name right. Yep, it's Lord Yama. Is the primary deity responsible for administering the process of reincarnation. He acts as the impartial judge of souls, determining their next destination based on their karma, the accumulated results of their actions in life. After death, the soul is brought before Yama, who weighs its good and evil deeds. Depending on this judgment, the soul may be sent to Swarga, heaven, Naraka, hell, or reincarnated back to earth. The cycle of reincarnation continues until the soul achieves moksha, or liberation from the cycle of birth and death. There you go. Well, I'm glad I got that right. Now, I have to finish my point. Although I know I've got a second comment from Bettel. So I'm saying that Hinduism is fragmented, Buddhism is incomplete because it does not attribute reincarnation to any deity. And many of you probably don't know that Orthodox Jews ultra-Orthodox Jews believe in reincarnation too, and obviously they would just attribute the administration of reincarnation to, of course, the Abrahamic God. So that makes sense, doesn't it? And what I like about the Abrahamic God is that he's perfectly logical. There's nothing illogical about believing in the Abrahamic God other than not wanting to obey the rules. Fine, but just admit that that's a reason instead of pretending, you know, instead of claiming all kinds of false reasons. And I've already explained that the reason why the Abrahamic religions wreak such havoc, according to Bettel, is because, well, they're just better at organized violence. And because they're better at organized violence, they're better at acquiring empire. And obviously, the acquisition of empire requires military organization and wars. And if you want to maintain your empire, you also have to you use military means sometimes to do so. But you can still control global opinion if you have a global empire by, with global media and a global narrative. So I hope it's beginning to come clear where I'm going with this. I mean, if you're a rational person and you have a country to run, you would choose the best religion, and then you would ask yourself things like, well, what's the best possible religion I could have, right? And can I afford it? And then you'd be told it's all free, right? You just choose the best one, why don't you? And then you might be inhibited because you think, well, I do have a religion of mum and dad and grandma and grandpa, and I feel I would be looked at askance if I reject the religion of mum and dad, right? This is going to be the problem. And the reasons are social and psychological. Your parents might take their religion so seriously that they will disown you and maybe even disinherit you. So you don't want to be faced with that. And you might think to yourself, well, who knows whether God exists? I might as well just go along to get along with mum and dad. Right? This is how most people think. They might think about, there's some, operating philosophical or rational reason for them not to think about religion. But this is it. So the claim is being made that that there is an afterlife and God exists to punish us for our sins. And I guess from time to time we should direct our minds to this question about whether there is an afterlife and whether we are living correctly. After all, so many people around us are telling us, we are wrong and they are right, and we are evil and they are good. So we should have a care about these things, if only for the repose of our immortal selves, and to reach a state of serenity where we think we are doing the right thing. Well, we're not really endangering our immortal souls by doing what God has expressly and specifically forbidden, such as idolatry and blasphemy, So for purely political reasons, if you don't come from that sort of background, there is no reason for you to adopt Hinduism and Buddhism. And you already know that India is, well, it's called the biggest, the largest democracy in the world, just because it's got so many voters, right? Not that, it has helped them that much. It's only because their leaders have adopted representative democracy imposed on them by the Western imperialists. And we know, Buddhists are nowhere at all. If you, want to think of Buddhists in Thailand or Tibet or Sri Lanka, you will know that they are not exactly models of good government. Tibet is but a region of China, um, and that basically all countries in the world are oppressed by the global hegemon, that is America, apart from China, because China has an independent foreign policy, and to have an independent foreign policy is a measure, is conclusive evidence of your national sovereignty. So, of course, the UK doesn't have an independent foreign policy. None of the NATO countries have an independent foreign policy, and certainly not members of the EU. And now, recently, in the last few years, since the Ukraine war started, we know that the EU is just, the business side of NATO. And NATO is a tentacle of the American empire, run by its military industrial complex, which is a technocracy. So we need to understand our place in the world, the place of our country in the world, the place of our religion in the world, or the place of our chosen secular political ideology, such as whether we are nationalists or conservatives or liberals. We need to understand all those ideologies to know where in the hierarchy we belong. Because what we're trying to do is to get to the top so that our grievances can be made known. In ancient China, there was this idea that if the local officials were oppressing you, you could go and appeal to the emperor. And I believe in Beijing that there was actually a kind of hostel or something for these people who come all the way from the provinces to complain to the imperial to the emperor about the behavior of his local officials. So whether their grievances were dealt with properly or at all is another thing, but the mechanism, even if it's flawed, existed, and the artifacts of it still remain. That you had the right to complain to your emperor, and there would be accommodation for you when you arrived. And you are being taken seriously, because obviously if you're not being taken seriously, you'd be shown the door. But it's like, well, if you've come, I don't know, however many miles it was from your faraway province just to complain about your local officials, you obviously should be taken seriously and should be given a degree of hospitality. So I'm saying, yes, in theory, there are mechanisms for making the grievances of the voters known, through general elections, etc., MP surgeries and that kind of thing. But what if you've chosen the wrong political system, such as absolute monarchy? Well, we know from European history that if you're an absolute monarch and you really, really, really annoy, say your nobles will gang up and kill you, or there would be a civil war between rival royal families, such as in the War of the Roses, or you could end up being the victim of regicide if you really disappoint and anger your subjects so much that they decide to behead you. Or they might not be so angry, they'll just force you to abdicate and replace you with another king in a peaceful way. But why not choose the best political system? Can we not agree that the fairest system would be a meritocracy? And how would we best produce a meritocracy? The founding fathers believed that monarchy is the antithesis of meritocracy. And the reason is clear, how even if you have the best king in the world ruling your kingdom now, there's no guarantee that his son will be any good. And we know from Jewish history that your son could be totally useless, because we know that King Solomon, who was famed for his wisdom and his wives and concubines. He had 700 wives and 300 concubines, apparently. But he died an idolater, and his son split his kingdom into two, because he must have spent too much time with his harem to teach his son the skills of kingship. So, we should know by now, really, in the 21st century, that absolute monarchy is just not the way to go. I mean, considering it actually ended over 100 years ago in 1918. That was when Christendom ended, when the German Kaiser was made to abdicate because the war went badly for him. Ditto the Austrian emperor. And worst of all was Nicholas II, the Tsar of Russia. He was exterminated with the entire royal family in 1918. So none of these events are in dispute. It's all there, but obviously they haven't been put together in a way that schoolboys and schoolgirls can understand. And that is why what I'm saying now is so shocking to so many people. I keep talking about Christendom because I'm saying, well, the whole point of, the highest point of successful Christianity would be Christendom, right? And Christendom just meant a Europe of Christian kingdoms. That was Christianity at its height during the Roman Empire, and even after the Roman Empire collapsed. The remnant that was the Roman Empire was the Roman Catholic Church, and once upon a time, everyone in Europe was Catholic until they became Protestant, and then the Protestants faced the difficulties of the Hasmonean dynasty. The Hasmonean dynasty was known for having the position of priest and king residing in the same person. So it was a separation of powers issue. And anyway, as we already know from history, the Hasmonean dynasty is over and out. But there's something actually quite distressing about this to me, because there's actually a Jewish school in London called the Hasmonean School, and this suggests to me that even the Jews have not learnt their lesson. And yes, another thing about these Jews, that everybody thinks they're so magic and so super cunning, and they control everything. It's like they don't even know the lessons of their own history. Why on earth are they still doing the kaporot thing? So we know, I think we all know, that scapegoating was actually a Jewish idea. And we know it didn't help the Jews because, when they were living in the ancient kingdom of Israel, they would create this ritual whereby I have to read this out to you because it's so bizarre. The scapegoat. And I'm wandering off the subject of Paul Vanderklay, but I promise you I will get to it. This is very much a stream of consciousness. In the Bible, the scapegoat is one of a pair of kid goats that is released into the wilderness, taking with it all sins and impurities, while the other is sacrificed. The concept first appears in the book of Leviticus, in which a goat is designated to be cast into the desert to carry away the sins of the community. That was obviously before the concept of repentance and tshuva was conceived of. Then Aaron shall lay both his hands on the head of the live goat and confess over it all the iniquities of the people of Israel and all their transgressions, all their sins, putting them on the head of the goat and sending it away to the wilderness by means of someone designated for the task. The goat shall bear on itself all their iniquities to a barren region, and the goat shall be set free in the wilderness. What if he comes back? It's just stupid. Okay. I thought it was thrown off a cliff or something. Okay. Well, anyway, when the Jews moved to New York, I mean, they couldn't do that anymore, could they? I mean, we'll wander off into New Jersey. What are the surrounding areas of where is it? I'm just imagining the goat, the scapegoat, wandering into New Jersey. Well, what are the adjoining areas of New York? Okay, the inner 5 boroughs. Okay, I'm not looking at the right map. But anyway, you know what I mean. They couldn't do it anymore. They couldn't send a goat out with their sins on it. So they used a chicken. That was kaparot. And then it just made things worse for them because, after killing the chicken, they just left the chicken because they couldn't be bothered to take it home because it was too much of a job to, properly butcher it and take off its feathers and gut it, and it was just a horrible thing. And they just decided to leave it, and of course the New Yorkers were horrified and disgusted at the sight of these suffering chickens who were in fact wasted, and that incited quite a lot of anti-Semitism. Okay, I've got a lot of comments. I promise I'll deal with all of them. So, any God who allows sex slavery is no God at all. Now, does that mean you're okay with, ordinary slavery? Is that your position? As long as it's not sex slavery, you're okay with it. I'll wait for your further comment. But the thing is, your slave girls might say, well, we'd rather not be cleaning toilets and looking after children. But if being prostitutes would earn us manumission sooner rather than later, we don't mind if you're gonna, put us in a brothel to keep our working conditions safer. We'd rather do that than clean toilets and look after your brats, whatever. So what are you to say to that? If you have a bunch of slave girls saying, we'd rather be prostitutes and create just put us, in a nice brothel, keep us alive and healthy and pretty, so that we will get lots of clients, so that we will quickly earn ourselves manumission and be free women again. What are you going to say to that? Are you going to say no? Oh, of course, it has to be willing. You can also willingly sell yourself into slavery. It's called indentured servitude. You don't need an empire, Bethel says, when you have lots of resources. The Abrahamic God was born in a desert with limited resources, which led them to become more militaristic and better organized. Now, come on. The Abrahamic God was not born in a desert. The Abrahamic God created the universe. So, I can't take seriously anymore what you're going to say. Do you think the Abrahamic God is Jesus? Or maybe you're very confused. Jews and Muslims don't think the Abrahamic God was born in a desert because they think he created the universe. So you've got your chronology wrong. I think Yoav's comment is directed at Bethel calling the Holy Land a desert. Oh, Yoav is saying that PVK is apolitical. Is he really? I mean, he actually says, I come from a family of Democrat supporters. So, it's a kind of tribal religion for Paul van der Klee, right? And the thing about trying to be apolitical, that is in itself a political decision. I mean, I hear lots of talk about, red church and blue church, and I guess Paul van der Klee wants to be purple church. But that's also a political decision. I won't talk politics. I won't upset people, so they will come to me and not really know where I really stand on things. But how can you seriously think that it's possible to separate politics from religion? I mean, why is everybody going on about Jews and Muslims? Because it's political and religious, and it's coming to a head. The pot is about to boil over, and Paul van der Klee is just looking the other way and telling people to look the other way. No, it is time to look at it. It's time to, take the lid off the pot so it doesn't boil over, and look at the contents and taste the soup or whatever. Well, I mentioned that Paul van der Klee is tall because, obviously it's an advantage if you're a man to be tall, because it's not an advantage to be short. And, women are known for preferring their men to be taller than they are and scorning men who are shorter than they are. It's kind of instinctive and visceral. And I speak as a woman on the subject. So somebody like Bernie Ecclestone, who you may have heard of, he's this very wealthy. I think he's dead now, isn't he? He was short and old, and there's this famous picture of him having an arm, a beautiful blonde on each arm. Apparently, that famous story was, I think they're related to him, or they weren't really his girlfriends. But anyway, it's a picture that must hearten a lot of short men who, think that women discriminate against them, and they kind of compensate by being extra loud and extra energetic, and in their own way they're also exhausting, right? I still haven't got to him yet after 45 minutes, but I do want to deal with your comments. And Teo is here. Perhaps this is what has been providentially arranged about me going on a detour until Paul van der Klee's regular listeners are here. And I was going to share a video with you, and I will play it now. because that was really what I wanted to talk about.
Clearly, I didn't have enough like goal. Like the question was, are you trying to create community that's Christian or not? And I was like, I still don't know. I mean, I want to have these conversations.
Yeah.
I don't know where it's going.
Yeah, that was annoying. It's like, yeah, what does it mean to be Christian? And Paul van der Klee saying, yeah, let's move on to the next subject. I don't know what it means either. We don't really want to talk too much about it in case it's discovered and revealed that even pastors with their degrees in theology are clueless about what it means to be Christian. And I'm saying, come on. If you're going to be Christian, you have to worship Jesus, and that's it. And then I'm afraid you'll also be accused of idolatry by these Jews and Muslims, and that's what you'll have to live with, unless you are thinking of changing your religion. To continue.
Yeah.
I know that we need to be having conversations across the divide.
Yeah.
Across all the divides, really.
Yeah. Yeah, it's very estuary, very TLC.
Yeah, and for that reason, that's one of the things I've wanted to talk with you about. And we can keep on going with my story, but just the question of dialogue across lines, and whether it's the line or porous membrane between religion and politics, or the left and right. I think that the broader we go and the more inclusive that we go and the more open we are, the more possibility we'll see in finding common ground and things that we actually agree on. What in an age right now when things are so divided, we're divided in ways, and Brad and I, in some ways, embody that because we're on either side. He's on the right, I'm on the left.
Yeah.
Of that divide. And the question is, can Brad and I talk about everything that both of us want to talk about, to find and really listen? But it's like it's almost like we get locked into defensiveness or frustration, and a lack of will for the other one. In my case, I sense a lack of will and intention for Brad to really understand what I'm trying to say, because it already just sounds bad to him. He doesn't want to know any more about it. He just wants to refute it.
When I mean, this is often a dynamic that I hear in conversations. I just want to be understood. And the desire to be understood. And I often think that, when I see this in couples, because in couples, it's usually, most of the time, it's not right versus left. In couples, it's things that are much more mundane. I come home from work and I'm tired, and you haven't lifted a finger to clean up the house, and I just want to be understood. And I'm thinking, I'm not sure if you want to be understood or you'd rather just have the house cleaner. And so there's a lot, I think, that's built into that language, in terms of, okay, do you just want to be understood, or do you want to be agreed with? Because those are two different bars, and they're both legitimate. I mean, you could say, I'd really love you to agree with me. Well, I don't. Okay, well, there's that. I really want you to understand. Well, what could I do or say to help you feel understood? You have this with heard, of course. I just want to be heard. Okay. Well, what would I have to say or do that would help you feel heard? And of course, when you get into counseling, there's all this technology to, I repeat back to you what you said to me, but then the people say, well, you can say the words, but I don't know that you really understand. Okay, well, what would make you think that I understood? Well, and then sometimes you sort of pull it open and it's like, well, if you really understood, you would agree. Oh,
Right. There's a
That's a
lot of
different
that.
bar.
Yeah, a lot of that going on, and you describing it, it's brilliant. It sounds.
Yeah. So if you really understood, you would agree. Yes. And we have to find common ground. Yes. I don't know how much more easily I can explain it to you. Um, uh, and I wish to explain to you that any group would need a moral system. Call it secular political ideology such as liberalism or Marxism or Nazism or fascism or communism, but you need a name for this system of morality and rules that you claim to believe in, and then we have to codify the rules so that government and the governed know what the hell it is we're supposed to be doing and who has the right to do what. And we can't have it changing all the time so nobody knows what is going on, so that we are reduced to saying, whatever the law is, I will obey. Because if you don't, you will be considered a criminal. So all we're asking for is a stable, known moral system with an official handbook. That's what we want. So we don't think that the government is always up to no good, telling us lies in order to make us do something or other that isn't good for us. And we don't trust the government. And it's not good for the ruling classes that we distrust, despise, and hate them. And unfortunately for Americans, they have discovered that the pathetic state of the voter is only choosing between the lies they prefer to believe in. You can choose a presidential candidate that says he's going to stop immigration, he's going to stop the endless wars, and when he's in office, he just carries on as before. So this is the reality of Western voters. So we know that it's all a sham. If you're an Israeli, I think you'll be even more annoyed by being forced to vote. I don't know how many elections Israelis have had in the last 5 years, maybe 5, being made to vote every 5 years. This is ridiculous. And of course, their Knesset actually has a right to veto acts of parliament by the Attorney General, who is taking orders directly from Washington. And as we already know, Washington doesn't know whether, well, it doesn't know its arm from its arse. Because the ruling classes are fighting now, and I hear disturbing news of Trump promoting Lindsey Graham, who is the biggest, baddest neocon ever. So I guess Trump has not been paying attention. He hasn't been listening, subscribing to channels discussing geopolitics like the Gaggle or the Duran or Brian Boletic, or, well, the ones I listen to really. So sadly for Americans and the rest of the West, things are not getting any better, and it does look like we are heading headlong into World War III. We're about to have our rights taken away after some created series of events that will lead to civil disorder. They'll probably get rid of all the, boomers in homes, right? And once you have war or revolution, it's easy to reset the minds of the people. And this is what you have before you. I should also inform you that an academic called David Betts is predicting civil war by 2030. He did say in the next 5 years. He talks regularly to Louise Perry, I think, and he's a professor of war studies at King's College, and yesterday he was talking about how it's going to happen. He identifies as nationalist, but he's already talking about how it might happen, which is kind of proposing how it could happen. He obviously doesn't like Muslims. And okay, so he's even divided the groups participating in this race war. He's given them names such as Crown, such as Crescent, and such as Pikestaff. So the Crown would be, well, the current ruling classes. Crescent would be these pesky Muslims, and Pikestaff would be the angry white men. So he's predicting how things are, probably with a certain amount of relish, and he is being allowed to do so, which suggests that the government wants it to happen and is encouraging it to happen. And I suppose the consequence of it is that it will clear the house of the useless eaters and the elderly. The elderly who, are obviously not going to be turning out to vote anymore in their care homes. Basically, they can't afford it anymore. They can't afford such a generous welfare state. They need a car. And this is what they have in store for us. Is this what you want for your children? If you're planning to have one, and what if you're not planning to have children? I suppose you think you're going to be okay, but it doesn't sound like much of a future to me. So what I have in mind is that we can go to the ruling classes once I've discovered who they really are, and say, look, you don't have to take these extreme measures to, manage us. You can adopt secular Quranism, and then you can manage all kinds of things. But you have to reset the mind now. You don't have to wait for everything to collapse into a rage of civil race war. You can just give me a few interviews on mainstream media so I can explain how I'm going to solve all your administrative and your ideological and your social problems, and make it fun. That is what I propose. But sadly, people don't really want to hear it from me. I actually have friends that I've known for a long time, and obviously they have heard of secular Quranism. It's just that they just cannot discuss it properly. Even when I present it as a philosophical discussion about the nature and purpose of religion, that they kind of want to run out screaming from the room, even if they have had, even if they did philosophy as an option at university and they went to a good university, they can't actually entertain my idea without accepting it. And the annoying thing is that they're not even Christian, they're not even confirmed, they haven't even made up their mind about whether they believe in God or not. And I'm saying, look, God, if you're agnostic, so am I. You don't have to believe in God to acknowledge that religion is very useful indeed. And this is why people fight each other to the death about which religion they want in their country. So Why can't we have a civilized conversation with each other since we've known each other for so long? But no, they can't do it. They want to change the subject and run screaming from the room. I tried to take a sympathetic position, even though I suppose my manner sometimes has been impatient. I get it that for Christians, I mean, they've been lied to for since the 4th century, right? They have been lied to since the Edict of Thessalonica in the year 380, when Theodosius decided that only the Trinitarian kind of Christian would be allowed in his empire. That did not prevent the decline and fall of Rome, and Edward Gibbon, who wrote volumes about the decline and fall of Rome, said it was Christianity that caused the decline and fall of Rome. In fact, I should read for you what the philosopher, the Roman philosopher, I think he's called Celsus or something. Let me see, Celsus on Christianity. It's worth sharing, really. He did not like Christianity. Celsus, I guess, Celsus, was a 2nd century Greek philosopher. He authored a lost treatise titled The True Word of True Word, which constitutes the earliest known comprehensive critique of Christianity and Judaism. His work, written around AD 170 to 180, was preserved only through extensive quotations in Origen's Contra Celsum, a refutation written in 248 AD, which scholars consider a reliable source of Celsus's arguments. Celsus viewed Christianity as a threat to the established religious and social order of the Roman Empire, criticizing it for undermining traditional values and civic duties. He argued that Christianity was philosophically unsound, claiming its doctrines were a haphazard amalgamation of false Eastern ideas from India and Iran, hastily tied together without intellectual coherence. Celsus dismissed the virgin birth of Jesus, accusing Mary of being an adulteress, abandoned by her husband, a carpenter, and asserting that Jesus was born illegitimately in a Jewish village. He also rejected the resurrection of Jesus, viewing it as a myth, and criticized the Gospels for their contradictions and historical unreliability, which he saw as proof of their falsehood. Celsus attacked the Christian doctrine of the incarnation as illogical and impious, arguing that God, being immutable, could not undergo a change from divine to human. He contended that the idea of God becoming human contradicted the philosophical principle of divine immutability, stating that either God changes, which is impossible, or he deceives, which is unworthy of a God. He also ridiculed the Christian belief in miracles, asserting that Jesus performed them through sorcery rather than divine power, and pointed out that Jesus himself acknowledged that similar miracles could be performed by wicked men and sorcerers, undermining the claim of divine origin. Celsus criticized Christianity for its social and intellectual appeal, arguing that it attracted only the uneducated, foolish, and lower classes, such as women, children, slaves, and laborers, while rejecting the wise and educated. He claimed that Christian communities gathered in private away from elders and teachers, encouraging children to reject their parents and instructors, which he saw as a dangerous subversion of family and societal structures. He also accused Christians of being ungrateful tenants who benefited from the stability provided by the gods in the Roman state, but refused to honor them through sacrifice or civic participation, including emperor worship. Furthermore, Celsus viewed Christianity as a break from the ancient, universal, and religious traditions of humanity, which he believed were superior and established by divine or ancestral authority. He argued that each nation had its own legitimate religious customs and that Christianity's exclusivist monotheism was not only foreign, but also a threat to the harmonious polytheistic order of the world. He believed that the rejection of idols was not a spiritual advancement, but a regression to the practices of barbarians like the Scythians or Ceres, whom he considered culturally inferior. Celsus also accused Christian writings of being selective and manipulative, containing only facts that glorified Jesus while omitting inconvenient details, thus presenting a biased and unreliable narrative. Despite his criticism, Celsus was not entirely dismissive of Christian ethics. He acknowledged that some Christians were successful in business, though he still considered their overall worldview foolish. He was a philosophical eclectic. He was a philosophical eclectic, drawing from Platonism, Aristotelianism, Pythagoreanism, and Stoicism, and viewed himself as a defender of traditional values and a conservative intellectual. His critique, while harsh, demonstrated a deep familiarity with both Jewish and Christian scriptures, as well as early Christian apologetics, indicating that he's engaged with the faith on an intellectual level rather than relying on mere rumors. Right. So Celsus was criticizing an idolater. Well, I don't know. I mean, he was saying that God is immutable, which means that, well, he cannot be an idol or a person. I guess philosophers have been known to contradict themselves, but to be fair to Celsus, he didn't have the benefit of having had the Quran revealed, so he can easily point to superior scripture. So he is excused for rejecting Christianity, but he seems to be mixing the two up together, Judaism, because obviously Jews don't agree with Christians about worshipping Jesus, and they're the ones who say that God forbids idolatry, and accuse Jesus of wanting to change the law, making him guilty under Deuteronomy chapter 13. So, but I'm saying if you want to, if you want to use the Old Testament to confirm Islam, why not use the book of Jeremiah, chapter 31, that actually talks about a new covenant? I know Christians claim that Jesus is a new covenant, but a man is not a covenant. Only something written can be a covenant. It's got to be something that you agree with, right? And so it has to be written. And so I'm saying the Quran is a new covenant. I mean, I'm just aghast that the Muslims haven't argued this already, but they haven't. And I tell them, and they just look a bit, well, I don't think they even responded substantively. It's all, I've never heard of such a thing, and therefore you must be, lying or not, that you don't know what you're talking about. But Muslims could easily say, look, the Quran was predicted in the book of Jeremiah, because God promised in the book of Jeremiah, which is a book of prophecies, that we're going to get a better book. Let me read it to you. I seem to have strayed off the subject of Paul van der Klee, but I will return to it. Oh, where is it? Maybe I misremembered it. Wait. Why do I bother with hard copy when I have access to the internet? It's 31 for some reason. I can't. Chapter 31, verses 31 to 34. Here we are. The time is coming, declares the Lord, when I will make a new covenant with the house of Israel and with the house of Judah. It will not be like the covenant I made with their forefathers when I took them by the hand to lead them out of Egypt, because they broke my covenant, though I was a husband to them, declares the Lord. This is the covenant I will make with the house of Israel. After that time, declares the Lord, I will put my law in their minds and write it on their hearts. I will be their God, and they will be my people. No longer will a man teach his neighbor, or a man his brother, saying, Know the Lord, because they will all know me, from the least of them to the greatest, declares the Lord. For I will forgive their wickedness, and I will remember their sins no more. This is what the Lord says. He who appoints the sun to shine by day, who decrees the moon and stars to shine by night, who stirs up the sea so that its waves roar, the Lord Almighty is his name. Only if these decrees vanish from my sight, declares the Lord, will the descendants of Israel ever cease to be a nation before me. This is what the Lord says. Only if the heavens above can be measured and the foundations of the earth below be searched out, will I reject all the descendants of Israel because of all they have done, declares the Lord. The days are coming, declares the Lord, and the city will be rebuilt for me from the tower of Hananel to the corner gate. Blah, blah, blah. But anyway, there's a new covenant. It is mentioned. So what can it be but the Quran? What do you think it is? I mean, the Jews, I know the Christians say it's Jesus. But what laws did Jesus write down? He wrote down nothing. He was never in a position to make the law because he died an executed blasphemer. Yes, and going back to what Paul van der Klee was saying about people complaining that they were not heard, they were not understood, and they were not agreed with. Obviously we want all three, and I am saying that if you really understood what I was saying, you'd agree with me. And that's why I'm always complaining about people being stupid or pretending to be stupid, which means that they are dishonest. And it is the height of dishonesty to lie to oneself. It is an act of self-harm, really, to lie to yourself and continue lying to yourself and reject any attempt at correction or critical self-analysis. But then people might assume they know what the outcome of critical self-analysis, because first they have to believe in God to act correctly. And I'm saying, yes, you have to be, you have to, because otherwise you would think there is no, if you think good will not be rewarded and evil punished, then you won't do the right thing because you won't be rewarded, right? That is how most people think. But they might even agree with you in theory that, such and such is the correct and moral course to take, but they won't do it because they don't want to be punished for doing the right thing. And therefore, it makes it very easy for me to question the people who I deem to be capable of understanding what I'm saying, and having no choice but to agree with it. Because Paul van der Klee refuses to discuss the Trinity because he is wise enough to know that the Trinity cannot be defended without reintroducing blasphemy laws and the burning of heretics at the stake. And this was how it was accomplished when Christians took Christianity seriously. Not that the majority of Christians even believed in God, but obviously you're going to take it seriously if questioning the Trinity would end up in you being burnt at the stake. And then you would reason, well, do I have to say it? I could just shut up about it and be allowed to live my life and run my business and prosper, instead of ending up being burnt at the stake. And you have to also, I think, understand how the heretics, who must have known they were going to be burnt at the stake, I'm sure they were warned a few times, like, well, if you carry on questioning the divinity of Jesus and asking again and again how Jesus is God, and knowing that the ignorant priests cannot answer your question, you will end up being burnt at the stake. And I guess the so-called heretic who didn't care thought, well, I can't wait till I die a natural death to discover if Christianity is idolatry or not. And so they willingly submitted themselves to be burned at the stake precisely because they believed that God would reward them in the afterlife, though they were made to die horribly, being burnt at the stake by their tyrant monarch. And so that was how Christianity operated. And I really only know Paul van der Klee through Jacob Varturecci because of a video he made about Michael Servetus, who was burnt at the stake in Geneva by John Calvin, who had form for doing that sort of thing. But it wasn't just him, obviously. Anglicans did it, Catholics did it. Orthodox Christians also burnt heretics at the stake because these Christian monarchs would understandably not want their subjects to believe in any other religion that their king did not share and invoke their God to punish their king. But the 20th and 21st century has been a time of flux where people are not quite sure what to think. And I'm saying, here's my system. You don't have to believe in it, but, this is what you're supposed to believe if you believe in, if you want to believe in the afterlife where good is rewarded and evil punished. And if you don't, then you're clearly not understanding the Abrahamic moral system clearly. And I'm saying Christians of all people don't really understand. I mean, does Paul van der Klee really believe in God? And if he did, shouldn't he be concerned that Christianity is idolatry? And if he's so sure it's not idolatry, then surely he would be prepared to discuss it. But since he isn't, he must know that the Trinity is indefensible. But he still wants to carry on being Christian, because I guess he's not going to convert to Islam, right? Because that would, well, he's a pastor after all. What's he going to do? I suppose he could run the mosque. And in the meantime, derive an income from his YouTube channel, I suppose. It could blow up. Were he to do such a thing, and that would make him, the first proper proper convert. I mean, who stays in the occupation of his obviously he's a pastor, so he has to be promoting Christianity. But if he converted to Islam, he could be the imam of Sacramento, of Livingstone's mosque or something. Well, okay, maybe he doesn't want to do that. Maybe he thinks, lots of the Islamophobes would just blow up at him and be so angry at his betrayal or whatever. But then these are just worldly concerns, aren't they? They're just worldly concerns about, what mum and dad and daughter or son and wife will think. It's like, well, if you really believe in God, you would be prepared to make all these sacrifices to please him, and particularly on a matter of religious principle. And what is this? Okay, even if you're not religious, it's like, surely it is easier to believe that the God who created the universe, if you believe that the universe was created, was not an executed blasphemer, right? Jesus did not create the universe. It's absurd to think that Jesus created the universe. And then we come up with this argument of, like Christians use, like, well, if you believe that God is omnipotent, then of course he can enter his own universe. But then you can say, well, if God is omnipotent, can he be mad and silly and evil and hypocritical, etc.? If he's so omnipotent, can't he be all those things? And then the answer must be, why would he be mad, silly, self-contradictory, evil, and lacking in self-awareness? Why? And why would you worship such a being? And the answer must be, well, something's got to give, right? And particularly if Jews and Muslims who hate each other so much find themselves agreeing with each other about the oneness of God, excluding the possibility that he could be anything else, such as Jesus, then it would appear that Christian beliefs are, in fact, absurd, idolatrous, and blasphemous. Well, that seems to me to be a more logical conclusion than saying, I'm afraid, even though Christianity is absurdity and idolatry and blasphemy, I'm just going to keep on trucking where Christianity is concerned, because it's a religion of my mum and dad and grandma and grandpa, and that's how I roll, and that's how it's going to be. And it seems to me that Paul van der Klee is going down that route of gathering more people into Christianity with reckless as to the the consequences for these lost souls who are made to believe in Christianity, because, well, if Jesus isn't God, then they would be liable for eternal damnation, right? I mean, that's a bargain. Christians are Christians because they think only Christians go to heaven. But if Jesus isn't God, then Christians are not going to heaven. But there is Paul van der Klee, not prepared to defend the Trinity because he knows it's indefensible, still promoting Christianity or hoping to do so, knowing that idolatry would attract eternal damnation. Does it therefore mean that he doesn't really believe there is an afterlife? And he's more concerned with remaining a pastor than in the immortal souls of his congregation, both online and at Livingstone's. Who knows? Maybe he hasn't really thought it through. Maybe his estuary protocols are, a business model being sponsored by somebody or other to gather white people in Europe and America and stir them up into some kind of Islamophobic frenzy, whereupon they will just kick everyone out. But no, he's not really a Christian nationalist. He's actually quite disapproving of Christian nationalism. So, I'm really prepared to be charitable and suppose that he hasn't really thought it through, and he is, through his conversations with all these people, that he is trying to come to terms with the failure of Christianity and the history of the American Republic, which is basically trying to get away from Christianity. Why do you think the founding fathers separated the church from their state? Why? It's really such, you can't say, oh, it wasn't intended to do, what it did. It meant that you're just keeping Christianity and church and monarchy at arm's length. Well, actually, monarchy is, behind the church, right? Because it was monarchy who was pushing the church on the people. And if you could separate the church from your state, then you can separate the real evil that the founding fathers wished to abolish in their republic. They wanted to utterly reject the idea of monarchy, which is why you get all these rules about presidents being impeached, which is the idea that they're not above the law. They're not going to be, some Charles I figure, asking people who want, you said, look, you've done all these bad things, King. And Charles I said, by what right do you have to try me, Oliver Cromwell? This whole thing of trying me is completely unprecedented. You know that I, the king, started off, or the the idea of kingship is that you make the law and you impose it on your subjects. But obviously, over the centuries, these warlords or if you prefer, barbarian kings of Europe, thought that they would like to be well thought of by their subjects, and show that they just they were just abusing their power, and that their power is limited by something, in theory anyway. And of course, that person would be the Pope. The Pope would show his disapproval if they did things that he didn't like, such as issue interdicts. And interdicts were basically saying, your prayers for the dead, or whatever, it won't work because your king has been a naughty boy and he's got to go into the naughty corner until he repents, and then the prayers will work again. It's that sort of thing. Am I the only person who knows about these things? I just find it extraordinary. But anyway, it seems only I know about these things, because I take an interest in them. So that was how things used to work in Europe, and obviously the founding fathers didn't want any of that anymore in their republic, and they thought, well, there's nothing George III can do once we kick out the English soldiers, and that was what he did. But anyway, stuff has happened since the founding of the American Republic, the French Republic, also king killers, and the Russian Republic. So we have to be able to make sense of these things from a historic point of view. We have to detect a pattern and acknowledge it as a pattern. And even use such ideas of the Whig interpretation of history. And the Whig interpretation of history is basically well, of course, it's a liberal concept, and it's a kind of self-congratulatory concept, saying, "Look, aren't things getting better since we dumped Christianity? Aren't things so much better now? We're getting more and more freedom, and we're getting richer and richer, and more prestigious as we become better and better imperialists. Ain't it great?" That's basically the Whig interpretation of history. And its pinnacle was expressed by Francis Fukuyama, who wrote The End of History. He is part of the liberal tradition of saying liberalism is good for everyone. And I'll confess I haven't read the book, but it's basically about saying we will have reached the end of history when all the world is liberal, or practicing a liberal democracy, i.e., having their elections rigged by the CIA, as explained in a film called Black Panther. So obviously, people who have had their elections rigged by the CIA don't think that's the best that they can do. And many people just want to enjoy good government. And what do I mean by good government? It just means that you don't think your ruling classes are evil, stupid, or insane. That's all we ask for. We just want you, ruling classes who have control over the media and the economy and the army. Can't you do a better job of governing us without making you think that everything you say and do is mad and silly? Aren't we entitled to that? I would have thought so. I think I've more or less made an unanswerable case for better government, and it's a pretty low standard. I'm not saying I'm not even saying you have to actually be better at government. You just have to give an appearance of really caring about our views and our future, instead of ignoring and running away from all the questions. Teo says, obviously I want people to agree with me, and obviously I do feel that you can't be understanding me properly if you don't agree, and if you don't understand, it's because you're stupid or you're just lying to yourself and pretending not to understand. So I'm still waiting for you, Teo, to give me a full-throated defense of the Trinity, and I know you're not going to do it. All you're going to say is, I still don't want to be Muslim. And I still don't want to hang out with Muslims. I still prefer to hang out, with other Christians. And I get it. It's not like I'm always hanging out with Muslims. And Yawn God speaks the truth when he says, deep down, we're all atheists, including Paul Van der Clay, and this is why we don't care. And I'm saying Islam has a way of dealing with you hypocrites. Teo asks, when will I convert to Islam? I have no plans to convert to Islam because I don't need to. All I need to do as a moral and political philosopher is to say, you all have to agree with me, but all groups need a raison d'etre to exist, and therefore all nations, all the more, need a raison d'etre to exist, and say, we are the people who believe in X, who never do Y, and who always do Z. That is basically religion in a nutshell, and nobody's going to disagree with me. Even atheists will have to say, well, we have to support some kind of secular political ideology. and of course the Chinese would agree with me and say that, oh yes, you're right, Claire. We atheist Chinese people in China follow a secular political ideology called socialism with Chinese characteristics. They would have to agree with me, and that is their national moral system. So I just don't see how anybody can disagree with me about needing a moral system and then saying, well, if you're going to have a moral system, choose the best one. And it can't be Christianity, because Christianity has been failing for 500 years. Or even more. I say 500 because of the wars of the Reformation, but it was failing before, wasn't it? It failed the Roman Empire. It declined and fell, even though Constantine converted Rome to Christianity, and by extension, Europe to Christianity. That was his legacy. And it kept on failing, but it kept on spreading all over the world, to Africa, to Asia. And now, the West is a global political entity with its tentacles all over the world. And I'm saying the West could redeem itself by spreading, better things than Christo-liberalism. So Christianity was what liberalism rejected. Liberalism was liberation from Christian monarchs. That is really what it was. Try and understand it in those terms, and then it will become clear. So, horrible Christian monarchs burning their subjects at the stake, resulting in a series of republican revolutions rejecting Christianity, causing Europeans to have all kinds of newfangled ideas like Nazism and fascism and communism and liberalism, and they have all crashed and burned. What haven't they yet tried? They haven't tried secular Quranism. My parents were not Christian. If you, well, I hope one day you'll order my book on Amazon, Secular Quranism, and it will tell you that my background is Taoist, Buddhist, so I'm not Christian at all. But obviously, living in the UK for so long, I have taken an interest in, its religion, its people, its politics. I do have Christian relations, though, but I think what I say about Christianity stands. You don't have to be Christian to understand that Jews and Muslims have a point when they say it is idolatry to worship a man. And Christians should at least be honest enough to say, well, why do we worship a man? And some people who call themselves Christian, such as Sam Tidderman and Thomas Jefferson and, Unitarian Christians, have rejected the Trinity. But then they are treated by Trinitarian Christians as heretics. So there's just no possibility of Christians ever uniting with their nonsense. So Christian nationalism, as Paul van der Klee has been trying to tell all these people, it's like it's never going to happen. We are too divided, and the most we can do is go for moralistic, therapeutic deism. And what is moralistic, therapeutic deism? It is just well-behaved atheism. Vaguely, you think most people go to heaven, and most of the people you want to go to heaven will get to heaven, including your pets. No doubt. There is no hell, because that's scary. How are you going to be a good person? You just obey the law of the land. And if your government says gay marriage is fine, transgenderism is fine, you go along with it. You nod along, you go along to get along. And that is the whole purpose of moralistic therapeutic deism, which, horror of horrors, Sam Tidderman is promoting. Though he claims to be a Christian. But at least he's making the right move in the right direction. I mean, he won't talk to me because he's another white man smart enough to know that the Trinity and Christianity is indefensible. What is the point of becoming a Unitarian Christian and being treated as a heretic by the Trinitarian Christians and having no political power at all? Particularly in America. I just don't understand why Americans think it's going to solve their problems if they become Orthodox Christians. I mean, they're basically outing themselves as white nationalists. Why would any white person choose Orthodox Christianity other than to say that I reject Catholicism because it's too liberal, as well as Protestantism, which is, is too liberal, but I support the Christianity of Putin because at least the Russians seem to stand for something and are able to stand up to the neocons of the West. Even if they don't think these thoughts consciously, I'm sure has something to do with having a sneaking admiration of an uncontaminated church, because they think that the Orthodox Orthodox Church in Russia remains traditional and uncontaminated. But the Russians too have been subject to disruption. They did have a Russian revolution. The communists obviously, didn't burn down all the churches and stop them from ever opening again. But obviously they would keep the priesthood under control. So, and also Western Europeans and Americans have no tradition of Orthodox Christianity. The rituals will be foreign to them. And I know, people like their hocus pocus and mumbo jumbo. They like not understanding Latin. They like not understanding, the purpose of the rituals and the Eucharist. And that's what they like, not understanding it or pretending they don't understand it. And I'm saying there's already a lot of things you don't understand and should be applying your mind to than, kind of suspending your disbelief because you think it's some kind of performance every time you go to church. So what's his name? Andrew Turnett, the one who, the Chinese Orthodox Christian, Coptic Christian, I think he is. He actually said he liked it because he didn't understand it, and the ritual was, new and fresh when it was sort of ancient and opaque. I think he was saying that it's now full of white nationalists. And he might be suggesting that he didn't go there very often now. But I think it's enough. It's enough to dispense with the ritual as long as you understand the theory of it, which is that you're going to go to hell if you disobey God's laws. But you'll go to heaven if you pass the exam, that is, this life. And in order to pass the exam, you need to follow the correct set of laws. And the correct set of laws will be the laws that no one denies. Okay, no one is a bit wide. You will have to follow the laws that is most rational for you to follow if you believe in the Abrahamic God. So you, if you're Gentile, cannot follow the Torah because it's really only meant for Jews, and it has 36 capital offenses. So just ignore that. You can't follow Christianity because Christians are, in fact, compelled to worship a man executed for blasphemy. So you'll be breaking the first and second commandments if you are Christian. And then therefore you're only left with worshipping the Abrahamic God who acknowledges the prophethood of Jesus and his virgin birth and virgin mother, which, if you're going to be biological about it, it's in theory possible for a woman to get pregnant without sexual intercourse. It's even called a splash pregnancy. So if you don't want your intellectual serenity upset by being required to believe in absurdities because you're claiming to be Christian and worshipping a man whom you think has created the universe, then there is only one moral and rational choice, which you refuse to make for cultural, social, and political reasons. So we get it. I get it. Of course, I get it. But that makes you a hypocrite. And neatly, the Quran comes writing in and saying, hypocrites don't get away with it. They go to hell. So, isn't it brilliant the way it just blocks all the emergency escapes for hypocrites and Christians and Jews? It's just won all the arguments. Surely you can respect the author of such a book and such a system, surely. But if you want to, carry on being Christian, we will all know what to think of you. So I truly believe that Paul van der Klee, because he understands what I'm saying, has blocked me, because he cannot argue with the logic of my propositions. He just doesn't want to hear it again, because obviously he can't, face the horror of, leading all these lost boys of America into, by encouraging them to be moralistic, therapeutic deists, going to church. What would be the point? It won't improve their government. It won't stop Trump from declaring war on Venezuela. It won't stop Americans from getting a terrible reputation for being mad and silly and evil and crazy and malign. So I think it is really up to Americans to have these discussions, sincere and constructive, because ultimately they're going to get the blame. If America, if Trump goes crazy and starts World War III, but Americans are going to get the blame. If they say, oh, but we're just, ordinary Americans, we have no power, our government rigs our elections. They will still be expected to take the blame, as Jews are expected to take the blame for all the bad stuff other Jews do. So are Americans required to take the blame for all the bad stuff American foreign policy does, because if they still support democracy, then they're still saying, we will get our government to correct itself by voting for these unprincipled political parties, the Red Party, the Blue Party, and when they actually know that these parties do not adhere to any principle, they will just go along to get along. If they see, a group of people that they can get votes from, they will create policies that these groups might support. And of course, the biggest group is women, the never married single mother, which is, really half of American voters. So they will keep falling into these traps and not actually correcting themselves, because obviously, they will think that elections are their, sacred tradition, including political parties that cause that including the political parties that make necessary these general elections, because you have to choose, a leader of a political party. And I'm saying, look, George Washington all those years ago told you not to have political parties, and you can't even bring yourself to read his speech, because I guess you're just not capable of it. I know it has long sentences, and the language is archaic, and nobody cares, right? Nobody cares about the true reasons of the founding of the American Republic, which is to reject monarchy because it is tyranny backed by Christianity, which is why the church had to be separated from the state. I just don't know how many Americans even understand what I'm saying. So Howard, who is American and probably Calvinist, because I think Schnover is a Dutch name, he says he's watched episode 1 and 2 of Pluribus. I haven't heard of it, but thank you for drawing my attention to it. Yes, I mean, wouldn't it be easy if we can all agree to accept one religion? I am not naive enough to think that everyone would, but and you have to give people the space to be wrong, right? And that is fundamentally what the First Amendment is all about. And I'm saying it is supported by Chapter 2, verse 256 of the Quran, that gives you the right to express incorrect opinions. And sadly, I don't think enough Americans value it, or and non-Americans don't even understand it. I mean, the British don't get it at all. I suppose that the government is keeping them deliberately ignorant, so that the British don't ask for something like the First Amendment. But I'm saying, if the British adopt secular Quranism with British characteristics, they will. It comes with a package, right? It comes with a package. No, I didn't say you were communist. I said Calvinist. Because I was talking about Paul van der Clay, who is a Calvinist pastor. Don't you have Calvinist ancestry, Howard? Well, I'm glad we cleared that up, Howard. So, since you mentioned communism, because you were so offended that I called you a communist, let me say a few words about communism, because I just think it's a sort of modern version of a peasant's revolt, right? When Marx wrote Das Kapital, etc., he didn't really talk much about the mechanics of it. It was Lenin who said, well, what Marx wrote was not enough. It's just a theory of communism. If we want to adopt his ideas, we need a political structure, and that was how he came up with all these gradated hierarchies of the Soviet Union. So there would be the Politburo, a Politburo Standing Committee, the Central Committee, and I think there's something else below that. So if you think of a pyramid structure, the people at the top of the Politburo would be a small group of 7 or 9 people, and then the Politburo Standing Committee would be, I think, about 20 or something people. They would make sure it has an odd number, so there would be no stalemate when it comes to voting. And then you have the Central Committee, which is kind of the gatekeeper, I guess, for ordinary members and the elite members. And it makes sense, right? It makes sense. In fact, the Chinese are going, appear to be going strong in their CCP. And then you have to ask yourselves, well, why did the Russians abandon it? And my theory is that the Russians probably were tricked by the Americans, who said, oh, you Russians, we Americans, we're both white, and we're both Christian, and we both want to make money, don't we? And, the Soviet Union, you're not making much money, and, if you become like us, liberal democracies, maybe you'll make more money. And the silly old Russians, they believed them, and they gave up their communism. But the Chinese, because they said, well, we don't have a tradition of liberalism, this newfangled thing, and we don't have elections, we don't think it's suitable for us for cultural reasons, so we're going to stick with Marxist Leninism. And so they did, and actually it's more rational than having 2 principal parties who are who have a long track record of breaking their promises and being incompetent and corrupt, it's probably a good idea not to have elections because, obviously people get tired of being lied to. So sometimes you just have to be aloof and mysterious, and people would respect you more than if you were always talking at them and lying to them. And finally, I am going to say that if George Washington had been aware of Marxist Leninism and his and democratic centralism, which is basically what it's called. It's called democratic centralism. Members of the party would discuss policy matters, and then when it's agreed, they all have to support it. So that's how it goes. But of course, there can only be one political party. So on this matter, Lenin and Washington were agreed. And of course, it's only logical to have one political party in the country because there are already enough divisions. Even if you have a one-party state, there'll be people who don't agree with all kinds of things, within the party. As you already know, that even when everyone was white and Christian in Europe, they had plenty of things to kill each other about. So let us minimize our areas of disagreement and do away with unnecessary divisions, and thereby enjoying better government. So what I'm proposing is keeping the First Amendment. I keep making the point that secular Quranism uncompromisingly supports the First Amendment. So no American who has listened to me or is going to be honest about what I'm actually saying will feel that the First Amendment is being threatened by secular Quranism. In fact, if you're not going to give your people First Amendment rights, you shouldn't even bother calling your Quranic system secular Quranism. I would make a point of that. If you don't believe in the First Amendment, if you don't support it, and you claim to be a secular Quranist, I would excommunicate you. Howard says, in the TV show, they did it with a virus from outer space. It just took over people's minds. But here in the real world, you have to encode your virus in words, take over minds in the old-fashioned way. Yes. So, obviously, when our politicians lie to us, or indeed anybody, they lie to you in order for you to relying on the correctness of the information given to you by the liar. You follow it, like the politicians lie to you, so you vote for them, right? And then they get to rule over you. So how would I implement secular Quranism? How would I get it adopted? I don't think it will happen if people are still, too afraid of discussing it. I think, enough people are aware of it. I'm actually quite pleased at how aware of it AI is. So, at least AI takes it seriously, and at least AI and I can have interesting, detailed discussions about secular Quranism without me feeling that they are deliberately misunderstanding me and distorting my views. So I think on general matters we can agree that the Abrahamic God is the most powerful being conceivable, who made laws for us, and I think we can agree that we're not going to be following the Torah, because most of us are Gentiles. The overwhelming majority of us are Gentiles, and there are 36 capital offences in the Torah, and not even Jews want to subject themselves to the 36 capital offences of the Torah. But we can't be Christians, because we might then be putting our immortal souls in eternal damnation, because Christianity offends against the first and second commandments, which are mortal sins. Therefore, we are only left with Quranic principles of governance, because while the Quran is from God, God, in his mercy and his wisdom, has allowed us the space to be wrong, and given us the right to express our incorrect opinions, so that hopefully we will in time correct ourselves or be corrected. I think we can all agree that we would like to live in a republic, and preferably a constitutional republic, so that the rules are written down, and we would also prefer to have the rules to be based on a system that has kept Muslims around for 1400 years, which is a better track record than anything you can think of. Any questions? No? In that case, I will end the stream and say goodbye.